Thank you for taking the time to join this session on data innovation and data protection. I'd like to start my talk with a question. Does anyone in this room know if the number pi has been fully calculated yet? Well, even if you put your hand up, I can't see, so I'll give you the answer. The answer is no, the number pi has not been fully calculated, and it never will be. Because pi is an irrational number, and the decimal points don't follow any set patterns. The current number of decimal points that have been calculated for pi is 100 trillion digits. And that took 157 days and a supercomputer to do. And if we had more time and more money, we could keep going, and we would always discover more digits, but we would never reach the end. For most practical purposes, though, only a very small subset of these digits that have been discovered are used. For example, you saw a video from NASA, the US Space Agency, earlier. In their calculations, NASA used only 15 decimal points for the number pi. For them, that is seen as good enough. And bearing in mind some of the calculations that they do are a matter of life or death. Now, what's the point of that? Why am I saying that? The reason I mention that is trying to build an unbreakable data infrastructure is a little bit like trying to calculate the number pi. We can aspire to it, but we are never going to get there. There are simply too many internal and external factors involved for us to be able to control all of them. But it is definitely possible to get to good enough. The question is, though, when you're designing your data protection policies, when you're designing your unbreakable data infrastructure, what is good enough? There is no shortage of techniques and technologies that you can deploy, from replication to redundancy, from snapshots to backup, from firewalls to erasure coding. There is a whole host of things that you can do. And of course, Hitachi Vantara can help you with all of those. But same as everything else in life, there is a cost associated. A cost that may not be appropriate across the board for all your data assets. So it seems logical that the first step in designing your unbreakable data infrastructure is to actually identify what are your data assets, what is the risk profile of your data assets, and who has access to them. You can pick up any number of analyst reports, and they tell you the cost of downtime in a variety of industries: finance, manufacturing, telco, et cetera, et cetera. But these numbers are all very generalized. I think it's fair to say if you are a financial brokerage and you lose your main trading system, then you're going to have a pretty bad day. But if you lose your expenses system for an hour or even for a day, is that really the end of the world? So I would suggest that the first step in mitigating risks associated with your data is to identify what you actually have and what is the risk profile associated with that. Once you've done that, you can then make cost-appropriate decisions on how you're going to protect those assets. Now, I mentioned some techniques and technologies earlier, from replication to redundancy, from backup to snapshots, from firewalls to air gaps, and there is no shortage of additional technologies that can help you. And thankfully, there are also many companies that you can partner with who can help you achieve your aim and objectives when it comes to data protection. So you've classified your data assets and you've implemented appropriate data protection policy. How do you actually know when something goes wrong? And this question is not as stupid as it sounds. Of course, if one of your main systems falls over, let's say your CRM system, then you're going to know about it because people are going to be shouting and jumping up and down, and you will know that pretty quickly. But what if some files are deleted, whether maliciously or by accident? How will you know? I've actually been involved with customers who've accidentally deleted significant amounts of data, and nobody realized until months later. And then, depending on your backup or archiving policy, it may be too late. You may never be able to get that data back. The point is, having a robust governance and detection policy is just as important as actually protecting your data in the first place. So of course, I'm sure in this room, we are all very alert and on the ball, and we will immediately realize if something is wrong. So what happens next? What do you do next? Do you call the vendor concerned? Do you even know who is the vendor concerned? You have servers, you have networks, you have storage, you have backups. Where does the problem lie? Do you do more internal investigations? How do you communicate with the business units that are concerned? Are there any external communications that you need to consider, such as regulators, for example? You can have the most sophisticated technologies implemented in your environment, but if you do not have adequate processes and procedures to respond to a breach in your data protection policy, then all of that investment is more or less rendered useless. People need to understand what to do, when, and how. Of course, prevention is always better than cure, and this is why we aspire to build unbreakable data infrastructures. But at the end of the day, the purpose of having this infrastructure is to be able to recover your data should the need arise, and to do so in a timely manner, in a manner that is appropriate to the risk profiles that you identified up front when you were analyzing what data assets you have. So, do you know how long it will take you to get your data back? Has this actually been tested, or is this based on some paper exercise? It's always surprising to me, a lot of people talk about protection and backup and monitoring, but not as much about recovery and how long it takes them to get their data back. At the end of the day, if your data is not where you need it to be, it's useless. Sitting on a backup platform or on some tape is not going to help you. So the recovery processes also need to be robust and tested. You've heard a lot about how different companies use data to differentiate themselves, to increase customer intimacy, and to maximize their revenues. Whether it's Netflix recommending what you might want to watch next, or whether it's Amazon doing dynamic pricing depending on supply and demand, or whether it's a credit card company using machine learning for fraud detection. Having an innovative approach to the use of your data is foundational to the success of any business today. And this is why designing or aspiring to design an unbreakable data infrastructure, as close as we can get to it, should be a high priority for all of you here in this room as our customers, but also as our partners.
Today, as we speak, this D to D to T, which is a traditional architecture, is slowly moving towards D to D to O, which is disk to disk, and the second D is for operational recovery with short RTO, and O brings much better, much lower RTO as compared to tape. And the third phase that many financial institutions in India are exploring, why do I need second D? Can O technology be so powerful that D to O can meet my operational and archival and strategic recovery? Answer is yes. It also gives you immediate protection on the spot with ransomware in mind, with any kind of archival, worm, legal hold, all of that together in one package. So that's the architecture, that's the trend which is shaping up, and I'm sure we will work on that and we can share something more interesting.
Thank you very much for your participation, really appreciate it, and more than happy, of course, to follow up the discussion after the sessions later on. Thank you very much.